So I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, and I'm pleased to do so. It is Janna Neitzel. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Yeah. Neitzel. She is a registered dietitian with the Stram Center, which is in Del Mar. Some of you may be familiar. She received her BS from RIT, the Rochester Institute of Technology, and her master's from the SAGE Graduate School. She completed her dietitian internship with professional certification, also from SAGE. She's a member of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and a board member of the Hudson Valley Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And she specializes in chronic illnesses, cancer, Lyme disease, diabetes, heart disease, gastrointestinal conditions, and food allergies. I'm not sure what's off that list. So she does quite a lot, and it's a great segue from our prior presentation where we talked about postmenopausal and et cetera, and trying to maintain a healthy BMI, et cetera. And she's always been interested in the medical field and in nutrition in particular. She's an avid runner, and I look forward to learning with her today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm testing out my little mic here. Can anyone hear me on that? Okay. You hear me in the back?
No,
they cannot hear me in the back. Okay. So I will, can you hear me better when I step up to this one? Okay, we'll just go with that one. All right.
Unless you want the handheld.
We'll keep it very simple. And feel free, if I start fading, you can't hear me anymore, just give me a wave and I'll pipe up, okay? So thank you so much for that introduction. It's an honor to be here and to talk to you about, we're gonna focus on, like the title says, blood sugar, estrogen, and breast cancer, but my aim is really to have something for everyone in this presentation. So whether we're focusing personally on prevention, whether we're talking about healing after cancer treatment or nourishing through cancer treatment. My goal is that there's something for everyone here. Just a disclaimer before we begin, this is not intended for personal medical advice. It's for educational purposes only. And as my introduction said, I am really blessed to work at the Stram Center and see lots of different patients, and I love what I get to do. So first, estrogen, and I'm sure some here know more than I know about estrogen, right? But it's got a lot of different roles in the body. So it's a steroid hormone. It's associated with the female reproductive organs. Males have estrogen as well. It supports the growth and regeneration of female reproductive tissues. It regulates the menstrual cycle. It has effects on the growth of breast tissue. It assists in keeping a healthy libido in women. It also helps to maintain healthy levels of cholesterol. We need cholesterol to actually make and synthesize our hormones. It keeps the pelvic floor strong and healthy. And if you don't think the pelvic floor is important, you should be one of my GI patients. It supports the health of skin, hair, and bones. It also affects mood and overall brain functioning. And I caught some of the last presentation where they talked about the protective effects, the connections to bone density, brain, heart health. So there's a lot of roles of estrogen. So estrogen is part of that overall hormonal balance. And there's a couple different types of estrogen. There's three primary types. So there's estradiol, there's estrone, estriol, and estradiol is considered the most potent estrogen, whereas estriol is considered the weakest estrogen. Estrone is felt to be the estrogen that promotes cancer, whereas estriol appears to be protective against cancer. So some of the specialty testing that we do at the Stram Center is we do a Dutch test, which tests the end products of a variety of hormones in the body. It's a blood and urine test. We do that alongside blood testing. It's a dried urine and saliva test. So we do that Dutch test alongside blood testing. The blood test shows us what's currently circulating in your bloodstream, but that's different than the end products, which the Dutch test picks up. And one of the many things that the Dutch test tells us is kind of how your individual body detoxifies estrogen. Does it detox that along a healthy pathway, or one that does increase your risk for developing something like breast cancer? And I apologize, I do have a silly typo on this last sentence, but too much or too little estrogen can throw off the balance of other sex hormones, and it affects one's weight and how we feel overall. So we can't meddle with one hormone without shifting the entire balance, basically. So blood sugar, it's so darn important that I made it, the first part of my title of this presentation. And even if you're someone here today and you have, no concerns about cancer, we should all be focusing on our blood sugar, because it is really our key to weight management, to regulating moods, to brain health, to so many things. So poor blood sugar control definitely contributes to weight gain. And weight gain, in turn, increases our overall fat mass, or our adiposity. As you learned towards the end of the last presentation, it's our fat mass that is actually an endocrine organ. It produces estrogen. So we're going to talk more about skeletal muscle into this presentation, but our overall goal is to try and control and limit our fat mass. And we do that by trying to maintain or build our skeletal muscle. So, in terms of weight loss, there is some warning here that we want to avoid any rapid weight loss, because if we lose weight too quickly, two main things happen. First of all, three main things. And first of all, it's that a lot of my patients don't feel well, right? You feel pretty crummy. A lot of my patients will come in, they're like, I thought I would feel great once I lost the weight. But if they do it too quickly, they have really poor energy, they have weakness. Some of that is associated with the muscle loss that is inevitable if we lose weight too quickly. Another piece of this is that our fat mass, our fat cells themselves, hold on to toxins that we come across in everyday living. It's our way of the body kind of protecting us. It packs these toxins away in these fat cells, so it's not in our systemic blood flow. When we lose weight rapidly, these fat cells shrink and they release what they're containing. A lot of that is toxins. So if we have kind of this toxic dump and our detox pathways are unable to keep up with detoxing all of that out of our body, people experience things like headaches, hair loss, skin changes, GI issues, to name a few. So we want to lose weight in the right way if weight loss is appropriate for us on our health journey. So balancing blood sugar. I'm not sure why it changed the order here, but so really it comes down to not only some stress management, balancing our meals, exercise, and adequate sleep. So when I talk about balancing our meals, really that comes down to making sure we've got enough protein, fat, and fiber at our meals. Those are the things that digest slower in our bloodstream. So, glucose is the body's preferred source of energy. It kind of zips right into the bloodstream, brings our blood sugar up, immediately brings blood sugar to the brain. We feel great. We've got instant energy. But without the support of protein, fat, and fiber that digest slower, we're going to have a crash on the other end of that. So really, when I talk to my patients about blood sugar balance, which is, kind of any condition that they come in with, this is a common conversation we have. They often think, I just need to cut out all carbs. And first of all, I don't believe that's any way to live at peace in this world, right? Navigating all the food choices that are out there. But it's also incorrect. We just want to balance things better. So I do recommend that most people try to avoid eating carbohydrates alone, pairing it with adequate, like I said, protein, fat, and fiber. So adequate protein, this is something we'll talk more about, but I very rarely see, especially my female patients, come to me meeting the mark with protein. Some first of all, when we look at the RDA, the recommended daily allowance for protein, that's for basic functioning. And the RDA states, about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. But really, optimal functioning comes closer to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So a lot of you, that's simple math. Everybody knows that math, right? And that is probably an overwhelming number for a lot of you. So I first work with, where are you at now? Can we get up to 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal? Most people can't digest a lot more than 30 grams per sitting. So that really means that we want to maximize every meal opportunity, right? If we want to get in our total for the day, we can't count on just getting that in at dinner, right? So that's kind of where we take the conversation. So in terms of cancer, we actually all have some precancerous cells in our body. And really what establishes who kind of, well, a lot of it's unknown, first of all, but genetics definitely play a risk here. And we all have the power to reduce our risk for cancer. So in terms of genetics, you might have heard kind of the saying of, genetics loads the gun, lifestyle or environment pulls the trigger. So a lot of us do have genetics that predispose us towards getting cancer or other chronic diseases. But we have a lot of influence over what genes get expressed and what don't. So I want you to feel empowered by that, not burdened by, kind of your own genetic makeup. We're going to talk a lot about many different lifestyle factors, again, which we can control. Some of the other things we want to consider are, how is our overall health? Something that the Stram Center specializes in is Lyme treatment and tick-borne illness. And there's actually a connection between one tick-borne illness called Bartonella and the development of breast cancer. And beyond that, I can't go into too many details because that's kind of above my pay grade, but that's a connection that we definitely recognize. And I'll also mention that we have many different providers at the Stram Center, some which specialize in different areas. One of our providers, our naturopath doctor, he specializes in cancer, and he is kind of the person to bring up some of these associations. So inflammation. Inflammation is definitely a part of cancer, and it definitely influences, if we develop cancer or we don't. It also impacts how we heal, right? So if we're going through treatment, how well are we tolerating that treatment, right? How well are we coming out of that on the other side? So we want to pay attention to our diet overall, and the standard American diet, which it's actually called the SAD diet for a reason. It's very inflammatory. So, we see a lot of fast food restaurants in a lot of different areas. So fast food is readily available. Alcohol and smoking are two of the main inflammatory factors as well. Lack of exercise, that is actually an increased risk. Sugar intake, and sugar could be a whole discussion on its own. I'll be mentioning it a couple times here, but when I refer to sugar, I'm mostly referencing added sugar. So really processed added sugar. Of course, there are natural forms coming from honey and maple syrup, agave, fruit. Sugar is sugar, so those do impact us, but there are advantages to using natural sugars, mostly that they provide other flavor, so we can oftentimes get away with using less and still having a satisfying dish. In terms of fruit, that is different in that fruit comes ideally in its whole food form, packaged with fiber, which we just learned helps to slow down that blood sugar spike. Another component of the inflammatory diet are, ultra processed foods. And there's definitely a spectrum when we talk about food processing, right? If we're buying pre-washed, mixed greens at the market, those are somewhat processed, but they're minimally processed. Someone has, cut them and washed them and packaged them for us so we can just go right ahead and make a salad. But what I'm referring to are, the bars, lots of our snacks, our packaged cookies and crackers, those ultra processed foods. Those are pretty darn inflammatory. And in terms of inflammatory oils, I like to keep it simple for my patients and guide them towards either using avocado oil for any high heat cooking, like sauteing or roasting. And if it's any low to no heat cooking, opting for olive oil or extra virgin olive oil. Another anti-inflammatory oil would be coconut oil, unless you have, high cardiac risk, or you're working on your lipid panel, you have cholesterol concerns, some of that, we want to watch our saturated fat intake. So on the other side, what are the things we want more of in the diet, right? Because the diet is either a source of inflammation or it's reducing inflammation. So we definitely want to get those vegetables in, and those high fiber fruits especially. We want to aim for 2 to 3 servings of fatty fish per week. And it doesn't have to be, fresh, wild caught salmon. It can be that, that's great, but it can also be canned wild salmon. It can be sardines, which I am like trying to help sardines make a big comeback. And I think I'm succeeding. A lot of my patients are trying them, and some brands are better than others, but Trader Joe's has the best ones. Don't try them till you knock them. They are highly versatile. And if you're someone who doesn't like to cook every single meal and you want to have some easy options that are high in protein, it's one of the top superfoods we can get. I mean, it is in its whole food form. Sardines are one of the highest foods in calcium that we can possibly get because of the canning process, processing the bones. So I can go on and on about sardines, but we've only got limited time today. Herbs and spices are definitely components of an anti-inflammatory diet. So curcumin or turmeric, that really yellow spice that's often used in curry dishes. You can put it in a lot more than curry. You can put it in your scrambled eggs in the morning. You can put it in smoothies or savory oatmeal bowls. That's very anti-inflammatory. You can, of course, take it as a supplement too. Let's say you're not a fish eater. You can take that as a supplement too. And some of these things not only have beneficial effects with lowering overall systemic inflammation, but, omega-3 fatty acids are supportive of our brain health as well, our joint health. So this isn't just applying to, wanting to decrease our risk for cancer. It's also helping us to really just feel our best. And then hydration is a main component of reducing inflammation. A rough guideline is about half your body weight in ounces. And from there, if you're working out, or let's say you have a bad bout of diarrhea, like if you get sick from something, you want to replace any fluid losses. So half your body weight in ounces is kind of the starting point, and then from there you want to go up to replace anything. So I realize I probably won't make friends off of this slide, but alcohol is really problematic when it comes to cancer, when it comes to breast cancer. So it increases estrogen. It reduces our detox pathways because the liver has to set aside everything else to prioritize detoxifying alcohol when we drink. It increases inflammation. It also it reduces our immune effects, our immune systems. It increases our fat storage. It immediately causes imbalanced blood sugar. And most of us have experienced the poor sleep that we get from even, moderate alcohol, especially late at night. It's one of the main causes of fatty liver, along with actually poor blood sugar control and too many carbohydrates in the diet. And like I said, it reduces our immune functioning. So, COVID is going around again. It's flu season. It's also the holidays. So this is something to keep in mind, as many of us usually are drinking more, right? So what to drink instead? Because I'm not the type of person to just tell you what to cut out of your diet. I am also the encourager of the healthy options. So mocktails are always a great option, whether that is a combination of seltzer with a splash of juice. Also, I'll just say a fancy glass can bring it a long way. Just put anything in a fancy glass and it immediately feels like some kind of a cocktail. And usually what people are looking for too at the end of a busy day is really that that ritual of winding down. And it doesn't have to include alcohol. We're used to it including alcohol for a lot of us, but it doesn't have to. So I encourage you or challenge you to try something else. It can be tea, hot or iced. There's also really a sober, curious movement that is growing, especially among younger people, because a lot of people are taking charge of their health and realizing even after moderate or low consumption of alcohol, they're not feeling their best, right? So there are a lot more options when you go out to eat, go out to drink. I've asked for a mocktail at a lot of different restaurants, and those are some of the best cocktails that I've ever had. There's also new shops popping up right here in our area. Most of us have heard of Empire Wine and Liquor, and now they have a new location called Empire 2, TOO. And it's an offshoot of that has a lot of NA beverages of all different kinds. So that's definitely a place to check out. So also we want to be mindful of the sugar content of some of these things. There are a lot of non-alcoholic wines, ciders. We do want to be mindful of the sugar intake. So exercise, I know that the last presentation touched upon this a bit, but especially in respect to blood sugar, the things that can immediately reduce our blood sugar are exercise and water intake. So if we drink water, that immediately it basically dilutes the glucose in our bloodstream. And what exercise does is it helps to facilitate the acceptance of glucose into the cell. So when we talk about glucose, we can't not talk about insulin as well, which is the hormone which is a key to unlock our cells and get the cells to accept glucose. So, when we eat something that has carbohydrate, we've got glucose in the bloodstream. The job of insulin as it's released is to get it out of the bloodstream into our tissues, into our cells. So that is encouraged when we exercise. And so the other main function of exercise is, of course, we want to build muscle mass or at least maintain it. Past the age of 35, we actually lose muscle mass if we are not actively working to just maintain it. And it's pretty depressing, but basically muscle is a use it or lose it scenario. It's also a use it and feed it or lose it scenario. So we want to be doing that strength building activity a bare minimum of 3 times per week. And then we also want to be meeting that protein mark. So we want to be thinking, where are my 30 grams per meal, right? Oh, we got a little cutoff here too. So mostly there are a lot of different diets that a lot of people think, will help them beat breast cancer, recover from it, prevent it. And all of those things can be true depending on the person. So my main recommendation here is to find someone you resonate working with, a nutrition professional, whether that be a registered dietitian or someone holistic who's maybe not a registered dietitian, but has a lot of experience working with breast cancer patients. And many different diets can work for people. There's also a lot of different evidence out there about these different diets. So there's plant-based diets, there are keto diets. Fasting has generated some good research, especially in the last 5 to 10 years in regards to cancer. And protein, we really want to make sure that we're taking in that main macronutrient that helps with cell regeneration. So I'm going to talk a little bit deeper about some of these diets. With the plant-based diet, there are advantages and disadvantages. Some of the advantages are that it is high in fiber. Fiber is helpful for detoxification, which we'll talk about more. It's helpful in bowel regularity, keeping those things moving. It definitely helps us get more of our phytochemicals, our polyphenols, basically plant healing properties. And it can reduce inflammation. Some of the disadvantages are that it can be difficult to meet some of our protein needs. We can also easily be taking in more carbohydrates than is ideal to balance our blood sugar, to manage our weight, to lower weight. We can also sometimes not be getting in enough of our key vitamins and minerals, things like iron, and especially our B vitamins. So that might be an area that if the plant-based diet is a good diet for us to try, we want to consider some supplementation. Again, working with the guidance of a professional is recommended here. And it depends on someone's gut health. So for some of my patients, their gut status is not good, and a lot of plant matter makes them feel very bloated, right? Gassy. Some people get, diarrhea or constipation. So again, you want to work with a specialist to find what's the right diet for you. The keto or low carb diet, again, some advantages and disadvantages. So especially for women do best kind of cycling these higher carb periods with some lower carb periods. And that's because we need some carbohydrate to make our hormones and balance everything. And also we need some carbohydrate to generate, especially some of our feel-good hormones, our neurotransmitters. We want adequate protein, and that's usually a little bit easier on a keto or low carb diet. And it's a very satiating diet. Those macronutrients are really filling compared to our carbohydrates. Some of the disadvantages are that, first of all, it can be a little constipating, especially if someone is not taking in a lot of higher fiber, low carb vegetables. It can also leave people feeling fatigued. They can have difficulty dining out, eating with friends, going to different events. It can be pretty darn high in saturated fats, depending on your food sources. So it's not a great fit for people who have cardiac concerns or their lipid panel isn't looking good. And it can also be really high in some of the processed products, especially things like, our factory farmed meats. We want to look out for that. So fasting, again, recommendations with fasting very much differ for men and women. Most of the research that we see is actually from, studies done on men. So we want to know that from the gate. But really, the main takeaway is that the best thing for us is to have some metabolic flexibility, to kind of cycle in and out of some periods of fasting, perhaps, and letting our body kind of dip into that autophagy or cellular cleanup, which is what is referred to as. And there are many different kinds of fasting. So there is the 1 meal a day. There is, an overnight fast where you, stop eating by 7 p.m. and don't start eating till, 8 or 9 or 10 p.m. Some people continue to stretch that window of time. And then there can be prolonged fasts that are 24 hours or more. Some people do water fasts or juice fasts. I don't personally often recognize or recommend a juice fast just because they can really do some funky things with our blood sugar. So some of the advantages of fasting are that, boy, is it simple if you don't have to plan a lot of your meals, right? It allows the body kind of that opportunity to do cellular cleanup. Digestion actually takes some energy, right? The body has to break down, absorb, sort out everything that we're eating, and the body gets that rest. It still needs a fuel source. So it turns to some of these fragmented cells that can become cancer cells, and it kind of eats those up, utilizing that for energy. So in this way, autophagy is a really good thing in terms of cancer. We often get more time in the day if we're not cooking and spending time eating our meals, right? It can be kind of a spiritual experience, actually. We at the Stram Center a couple of years ago all did a group kind of 5-day meal supported fast through a program called Prolon. Some of you might have heard of it, some of you maybe not, but it's very minimal amounts of food that still allows your body to focus on fasting. You get the benefits of cellular cleanup, but you are supported by some small meals. So you're not eating at all. But boy, does it tell you how much we focus on food. It's a big part of our lives. And when your mind can't focus on food, it's going to think about all the other things that you didn't have time to think about. So the other benefit for a lot of people is they do have more energy. I can tell you personally, I didn't sleep well the week that we did this fast because I just had a lot of energy. And I wasn't the only one who experienced that. Some of the disadvantages are that there can be nutritional imbalances. Some people, if they're fasting too much, it can first of all really have an impact on their metabolism. It can reduce their metabolic fire. They can end up with fatigue or headaches. Also, if they are already under a lot of stress, maybe they're not getting enough sleep. Work is really stressful. They are really stretched really thin. This is going to be really read as an added stressor on the body. And that's not something we want for that person right now. So these are all things to kind of consider. Some other lifestyle factors that we want to consider are, what is our total toxic load? What are the products that we're putting on our body? A really good resource is the Environmental Working Group's guide on first of all, organic foods, because we don't need to buy everything organic. If we can, great. But they come out every year with a dirty dozen list and a clean 15. So the dirty dozen is a list of foods that are most heavily sprayed with, some of these things we don't want on our foods, right? Pesticides and other things like that. And then the clean 15 is a list of things that we, if we're watching our budget, these make sense to not, buy conventional versions of. We don't have to spend the extra money to buy organic on. They also have a skin deep database, and they actually have even developed an app so that you can, if you're in the store, kind of scan a barcode and it shows you what is the toxic load of this product. Is this a clean product, moderately clean product, or really kind of a dangerous product for the toxins that it has in it? So that's a great resource for us. Other lifestyle factors are, of course, stress. I have certainly seen my patients who are kind of doing everything right. They are exercising, they are eating well, they are trying to get enough sleep. But if they haven't addressed the stress component, sometimes I'm having the real conversation with them about, we've made great changes together, but I think for you to see major progress or to continue moving the marker, we want to address that stress component. And that looks different for everyone. That can be as simple as, stress reduction practices or self-care practices, or it can be working with a therapist. I personally think we should all have a therapist, but especially if we're going through hard things like a chronic illness or cancer, that's very much recommended. What's our mold exposure? If we have kind of some of these mystery symptoms going on, especially respiratory wise, that might be something we want to look into. And then what's our connection to community? Do we have the support of family and friends and loved ones, or maybe a church community? We are not meant to do life alone. We're certainly not meant to go through hard things alone. So we want to make sure that we have a healthy community. This To Life is a really healthy community, which is an example of that. Detoxification. So we've got two main phases of detox. The first one happens in the liver, and then really the rest of it happens in our organs. Basically, we sweat it out, we pee it out, we poop it out. So if we're not sweating on a regular basis, that's a problem. If we are constipated, and really it comes down to having at least one bowel movement a day. Plenty of people can actually still be constipated, but having a bowel movement every day. So considering our regularity is very important. If we are not hydrating, that means we're not flushing things out. So that's going to impact our overall detoxification. And then in terms of supporting our liver, not only do we need, some specific nutrients that support that, there can be some supplements that help to support our liver, but also we want to be mindful of the overall burden from alcohol to, things like our skincare products. So as I mentioned, alcohol, smoking, those are going to increase our toxic burden. Some things that help to support our liver are castor oil packs. Castor oil can actually be applied to many different areas of the body. Also, if you're someone who has lost their hair in cancer treatment, or if you've lost your hair to COVID, which a lot of my female patients have experienced substantial hair loss from COVID, castor oil it can work miracles. We want to make sure that we're meeting our daily fiber allotment. For women, ideally 25 to 35 grams per day. That would be an area where sometimes I recommend my patients tracking through some of these free apps, their intake for a day, not to look at calories or anything like that, but to hone in on, how much fiber on an average day am I getting? And usually we're surprised to see, oh, it's actually only about 10 or 15 grams. If we're working to increase it, the bowel likes slow movement, either up or down in our fiber intake. It doesn't like any sudden increase or decrease in fiber. So take it slow. We want to make sure that we're digesting things well. Our digestion really utilizes three things. So our digestive enzymes made by the pancreas, our bile made by the liver, stored in the gallbladder if we have one, and then our stomach acid. Another component of bile is that it binds to things and helps us to eradicate it from the body. So it's a main component of detoxification in that way. We want to, of course, balance our meals, and we want to increase the things that help us to detoxify in our diet. So lots of detoxifying greens, especially those bitter greens, things like arugula, berries, very antioxidant and fiber-rich berries, and then specific herbs like milk thistle. Milk thistle is a great supplement to add to your routine just for basic detox support. And then, of course, adequate B vitamins. That's one of the main those are some of the main vitamins that our liver needs to fulfill all those detox pathways. In terms of gut health, majority of our immune system lives in the gut. Also, our gut makes a lot of our feel-good neurotransmitters, our dopamine. So we want to really support good gut health. Part of that is bowel regularity, which I already touched upon. Also, we want to be mindful of food allergies or sensitivities. A lot of us don't know where to start with this. And to that, I say again, work with a good provider who is familiar and has a lot of experience working with food allergies and sensitivities. There are a lot of tests out there that you can spend a lot of money on to tell you which food sensitivities or allergies you have. And still the gold standard is a proper elimination diet through the guidance of a medical professional. So if you see anything on Instagram or anyone marketing to you, just keep that in mind. We want to improve digestion because that improves our overall nutrition, right? We're not just what we eat, we are what we absorb. So if we're not fully digesting things properly, we're actually not well nourished. So what to eat if you are nauseous? So a lot of these things you might be thinking, that's great, but in the midst of treatment, I don't feel like eating a salad, right? And that's okay. But we do want to try to stay away from the really inflammatory things. We want to try to limit sugar, definitely leaning into some of the foods that are soothing to us. A lot of that comes down to, first of all, opting for cooked foods over raw foods. They're easier to digest and break down and absorb the nutrition from. They also are a way to pack in a lot of nutrition. So bone broth is a great thing. Even if we don't feel like eating, a lot of us can kind of sip on bone broth or do some different soups or do a smoothie. Again, you can pack in a lot of nutrition with a smoothie, and a smoothie doesn't have to be ice cold because, again, when we're not feeling so great, we don't always want kind of cold foods. So whatever kind of works well for you. So this is a very detailed slide, but some of the things I want to highlight is, if you were to make a smoothie that is like anti-breast cancer or, preventative or helping you to heal, some of the main things we want to include are a lot of these essential plants that have lots of healing properties. So in terms of blueberries, I recommend keeping like a good amount of frozen berries on hand, ideally wild blueberries. And those are higher in antioxidants, they're higher in fiber. And that's especially helpful, in the middle of winter when berries are not in season. Frozen definitely contains all of the nutrients. A lot of people think that fresh is best. Fresh is great, but frozen is also just as nutritious when it comes to fruits, also vegetables. We want to include some source of healthy fat in our smoothie, not only for blood sugar balancing purposes, but in terms of avocados, they have some essential plant healing properties. Also, avocados are one of the main foods that are especially high in prebiotic fibers. So that's helping us a lot with maintaining our gut health. Some other specific foods that we want to get in or consider getting in. The one that I'm actually going to highlight from this slide is getting those foods that are high in sulforaphane. Sulforaphane is a main component that helps support detoxification. So whether it is broccoli sprouts, which are the foods that are absolutely highest in sulforaphane, that's great, but it can also be things like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage. Trying to get some serving of cruciferous veggies in on a daily basis is just a really good idea, a good goal for most of us. And then, considering the liquid that we use in our smoothie, you can opt for whether it be a plant-based, dairy alternative if you don't tolerate dairy very well, or doing a coconut water, which is really high in electrolytes and some antioxidants. That can be a good option too. So in summary, I know I've given you a lot of information today, and I want to leave some time for questions. But, what is one thing that you've been inspired to maybe make a small change towards today? Can you limit some inflammatory foods or ingredients or products? Can you increase some of the healing things, whether it be ingredients or people, right? Those healing people in our lives. We want more of that. Can we get some nourishing movement every day? That doesn't have to look like going to the gym. It can also look like yoga at home that fits our schedule, or walking with a friend. And can we maybe consider joining the Sober Curious movement, or at least cutting back on our alcohol intake? So, any questions?
Thank you. I'm gonna start off with a question, then I'm gonna pass the mic. I noticed on one of your later slides for people going through treatment, if they're feeling nauseous, what to eat, and you gravitate towards the salty food, the cracker, the whatever, and it said preferably gluten-free. Do you have a take in general with regard to health? Because there's sort of a wave of people eating gluten-free, even if they're not a person with celiacs. Correct. So, is that something to consider or not consider? Is it relevant? Is it not relevant? Is it just a fad?
Yes. So first, if you're someone who has anything thyroid related, I generally recommend going gluten-free or really cutting back on your gluten. And that's something that we don't have time to get into today, but the molecular mimicry of the gliadin molecule has such it closely resembles thyroid hormone. So when the body has an autoimmune issue that makes it attack the thyroid, it can kind of get confused if we're taking in a lot of gluten, and it further attacks the thyroid. So that's something to consider. From a gut standpoint, gluten in this country is highly inflammatory, mostly because of what we put on it. Roundup is very, very problematic. And it's actually not even just used on wheat products. It's also used on GMO corn and soy. So it makes sense to get organic, non-GMO corn and soy products. But if we were having this conversation in another country, that would be entirely different. And maybe you're someone who's gluten sensitive, and you've gone to Italy and had no side effects of eating some pizza or pasta or bread. And for good reason. It's an entirely different crop there. They don't process it the way that we process it here. So in this country, it's very inflammatory. And for especially gut health, I do generally recommend trying to limit it. For some people, completely avoiding it. And there is one stool test that we offer at the Stram Center that can pick up if your immune cells lining the gut are actually putting out anti-gliadin antibodies. So that can tell me on a gut level how much your gut likes or dislikes gluten. So, yeah.
This young lady was first.
Thank you. From a preventive measure, do you have any thoughts on the use of continuous glucose monitoring to help people inform their diet and their lifestyle?
I love it. I wish that we could all have them. I would like one, but they're very expensive. Yeah. Yeah, it can give us so much information because everyone is different, right? So a banana affects you differently than it affects her, right? But it can also teach us about food combining. Something else that I wanted to mention just in terms of blood sugar balance is if we change nothing about what we eat, even changing how we eat can influence our blood sugar. If we, instead of starting a meal with bread, like when we go out to a restaurant, if we start a meal with vegetables, following that with protein and healthy fat, and ending with our carbohydrate, we would see a much lower, slow increase rather than a spike in our blood sugar and crash. And that's because fiber kind of does this magical thing where it forms kind of like a mesh network, and it prevents the sugar from racing into our bloodstream. And again, it digests slower than glucose in general. So even if we just change the order in which we eat our foods and we're not ready yet to make other changes, that can be beneficial.
Thank you for so much great information. I wondered if you could comment on coffee, stevia, and dairy.
Wow. Well, I wish I had more time because I could talk a lot about those. But in general, let's start with stevia. So stevia does not influence our blood sugar the way that sugar does, whether it's processed or natural. But we still want to be mindful about how much we are actually lighting up our taste buds, because that can influence our blood sugar to a degree, not to the degree that sugar does. When it comes to deciding what stevia product we should use, there are a lot of products out there. I always recommend going for an organic, pure liquid stevia over the powdered versions that are out there, because the powdered versions usually have some type of sugar alcohol, like xylitol, and any of those alcohols are really irritating to the gut lining. Also, in this topic of sweeteners, I definitely recommend trying to avoid or limit any of our artificial sweeteners. Things like Splenda, those are very irritating to the gut lining, and they're over 100 times sweeter than natural sugar. So it only increases our cravings for sugar. Yeah. Oh, and in terms of dairy, dairy is a large category, right? It's got everything from milk, which is usually the hardest to digest, to yogurt and harder aged cheeses, which are usually the easiest to digest. So there's different lactose or milk sugar components. They fall somewhere along that spectrum. Milk is the highest, yogurt is the lowest, because the good bacteria pre-digest that milk sugar. And really this, again, comes down to an individual recommendation. Are you someone who tolerates it well? Maybe that's something that we do an elimination diet to determine how well you tolerate it. I forgot your last. Coffee. So in terms of coffee, my recommendation for that is to try to get a high quality coffee. So ideally an organic one. Coffee can be a bit of a tricky thing if you're someone who has problems with higher histamine foods or high mold foods. Coffee is a higher mold and histamine item. So those, again, are bigger conversations, but ideally getting a really high quality organic coffee is great. If you're someone who is easily affected by caffeine, I definitely recommend opting for like a half calf or a decaf. Mm-hmm.
Getting my steps. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your talk. Kind of similar with the coffee, I was just wondering about caffeine in general for prevention.
Yeah, I'll admit maybe there's more for me to know on this topic, but caffeine as it relates to breast cancer, I don't know of there being any reason why you shouldn't have it. Also, coffee is one of the highest antioxidant rich things that we can include in the diet. It's full of antioxidants. So that's a reason for us to have it. But again, you know, in terms of our cortisol levels, that's another conversation that maybe we want to have if we're someone who is burned out, right? If we're relying on coffee just to get through the day, those are some conversations we would have. Yeah.
I just want to ask because perhaps we've all heard rumors or read articles that chocolate can be an antioxidant. A, is that true? And B, the sugar issue related to that, but is there any recommendation you can advise? Because some of us feel that chocolate should be a food group.
Well, I would be one of those people. So yeah, it is very antioxidant rich. Also, the higher the percentage, the better, because the more antioxidants that it has and the lower the sugar. So that's kind of our guideline. And, you know, you can kind of work your way up there too, because it's an acquired taste. The darker you go, the more of a dark chocolate eater you are, the darker you will start to like it. So yeah.
We can eat. I'm coming this way. Thank you.
Hi, going back to herbs and spices, you were mentioning about turmeric.
Yes.
I was wondering if it's safe to take the curcumin supplement while I'm on letrozole, or if there's any latest study on that one. Because I'm just reading like all mixed when you search the internet.
Yeah, that's a little bit above my pay grade. Yeah, I would check with your medical provider on that. Yeah. Sorry, I don't have an answer for you.
I have read and experienced the effect of AIs on increasing blood sugar. Do you have any thing to say about that?
AIs.
Aromatase inhibitors.
Oh, yes. Yes. Again, that's a bit of a bigger conversation, but I'm happy to dive into that kind of outside. But yeah, I've seen some for and against it. So I think that's an area where I would say I'm going to need more evidence to be able to give a full, you know, yes or no on that. A lot of nutrition is that we still have so much to know. Just when we think we know something, we come out with the opposite information couple years down the road. So
I'm going to make a plug for, we've had a couple of comments and questions about dairy in terms of the nutrition, about dairy, about blood sugar and AI being an example and other things. Please write down on our evaluation sheet that you'd like to know more about that. So because I'm postmenopausal and I don't remember everything. We want to be responsive to the kinds of talks that would be beneficial. So if you write that down, we will take that under advisement, and, you know, maybe next time we'll have a talk that's specific to that because we have more time. Thank you. More questions? Down here? Anybody else with a question? We have 2 minutes, 1 minute. Okay, so I think Eileen has some, I think we're all set, and I want to thank you again.
No, just in closing, I did bring a few cards with me, not nearly enough, but also you can find out a lot of more, you know, information about me, a lot of different articles, blog posts from our Stram Center website. So it's just stramcenter.com. And you can read more about our different providers. Again, some specialize in cancer. And then we have all different types of treatment. We have a lot of cancer patients, especially who do high dose IV vitamin C, not only to support them through their cancer treatment, but also to help them basically tolerate the treatment better. We've had a lot of patients who don't have to get as much chemotherapy or radiation because they've supported them, kind of their body with these other tools. So, yeah.
So thank you. And for logistics, Eileen, you want to mention
logistics? Actually, my first question is I have an earring, which is this nice little triangle, like fan looking earring. So if anyone lost an earring, it is up here on the podium. I'm going to leave it right here on the edge if that belongs to you. And so, oh, there we go. Okay. Thank you, Jan. That was absolutely It seems the more we learn about food, the more we want to learn, right? And isn't food so comforting? You probably covered this, and I might have walked out of the room for a moment. But, food is one of those really great, but very personal experiences for us. And who doesn't like to eat, right? Is there anyone here that doesn't like to eat? Okay. So now let's talk about eating and how the rest of the day is going to go. So we have a wonderful lunch waiting for you up at the Cancer Research Center. The majority of people are in this space here. And so if we can split into two groups, and I don't know how to do that, like people okay, so if we could generally, that back 3 rows would go with Barbara and Mr. Conklin, who is the director. I want to introduce you to the director, Dr. Conklin, excuse me. Yes, Dr. Conklin. Okay, yes. And so Dr. Conklin is going to lead people through a brief tour of the research labs. And then the second group, so you want to bring your coat with you. And so that all takes place up in there. So we're going to go outside and go up to that other room. The other group will be going through the lunch line. I mean, it's a buffet style. And so that'll kind of just give us, so you don't have as much time to wait. And then at 12:30, you'll have an opportunity to go on the lab tour. If you don't want to go on the lab tour and you can enjoy lunch, whatever works for you. So you've got those 2 options. So those are your 2 choices. Any other questions? And then we meet back here at 1:15 for the last and final speaker of the day. Okay, thank you. So you're taking the group.